is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. It's 11:30 on the 31st of October here in Cologne, and to many people it's considered to be the witching hour nearly, and a time that people celebrate Halloween. Of course, there is a long and interesting history about Halloween. And it's so much more than just the, I suppose you could almost say, Hollywood version that people now celebrate. I thought I would just quickly give you just a little bit of history of Halloween first. So, very briefly, it started off as being known as Hallows or All Hallows Eve. It was a celebration that is now on October the 31st. But originally it came from an ancient Celtic ritual of Samhain. And this was a festival that is very common in Europe, I know, for the changing of seasons from light to dark, or from summer to winter. And this always took place around November the 1st. It's probably not unsurprising that the clocks go back last weekend, and this is obviously a time where things are getting dark, and therefore people have fires and fireplaces. So a traditional bonfire would be lit. In the old days, people would have sweets, and people would wear scary-looking outfits in order to scare off, apparently, the spirits. And the Celts believed at this time of year the curtain between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, if you like. Not completely transparent, but very thin. So they believed this was the time of the year that you would be able to contact the dead. Now, early Christians, like so many of these pagan holidays, they tried to stop them and prevent people from doing this. And I think the popes tried to change the names, as they did, to make it sound more of a Christian thing, and change some of the things about it. And I think All Saints' Day was created on November the 1st, and that was apparently a celebration of saints and Christian martyrs. And November the 2nd became All Souls' Day, which was a day for remembering the souls of the dead. But eventually All Saints' Day later became known as All Hallows' Day. And October the 31st became known as All Hallows' Eve. And then later on Halloween. And really, in spite of the efforts of the church, Halloween continued to be celebrated with traditional bonfires and costumes. And people did have a focus on the spirits of the dead. As I've seen in this podcast, there seems to be a reluctance among Christians to accept parapsychology, psychic communication with the dead, all of that stuff, which always seems to me to be slightly ironic, considering so much of Christian theology is based on spirits and communication with the dead. But I suppose they felt that too much of that wasn't probably a good idea, and maybe they were worried that, I think probably the Catholics were worried, that it could end up turning into something more malevolent, because I think they believed that Satan and all his works were the people that would come through and haunt people or possess people, and they wanted to keep probably clear blue water between all that side of stuff and then the things that were going on in the church. But Yeah, so there was all of this stuff, but it was very, very different from the Mexicans who were doing their Dia de Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. That was a very different sort of celebration, which actually coincidentally happens at the same time. And while Halloween was very much about the grim side of death, the Day of the Death celebrations tend to focus very much on a connection that exists between the living and the dead, as well as life after death. And I always very much enjoyed the fact that I heard in Sweden at this particular night, people go to the graveyards and they put a candle on top of all the headstones. And they light up the graveyard, and they turn it from being something grim, perhaps, to something rather beautiful. And it is perhaps what I found when I've been in all the graveyards, is that there is that terrible sadness, I think, among some of the people who are buried there, that they're sort of forgotten once they're thrown into a graveyard. I'm not making judgments whether people should be buried in a graveyard or not. I'm sure we've talked about that, but the fact that we do put so much energy into burying people, or burning them and putting their remains in a graveyard and just leaving them there as if they're away from society in their own park, and completely removed from the people that they loved, and only visited on occasions, if at all, as they get forgotten. Is that really the best place? Anyway, they do on this particular day in Sweden, I know, put a candle, and they all go into the graveyard, and they all have a sort of, I suppose it's a sort of a party, and that to me sounds absolutely wonderful. But Halloween in Europe, the one that we see today, was very much a time that people sort of carved turnips and things and placed candles inside things to ward off the evil spirits. Americans, of course, switched from turnips to pumpkins. Now, because Halloween has got such a spooky and undead feeling about it, it became the place that horror movies decided to go. And so many horror movies and television shows have used Halloween as the basis of scaring people. Probably the best example was John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, and it certainly changed people's image of this holiday, which was a night for children to dress up, into a night of pure terror. I also remember when I was young, I saw the classic To Kill a Mockingbird with Gregory Peck, and I remember Scout and all of her friends in that film, and of course the book by Harper Lee, going out on Halloween to trick or treat. I think that was the first time I ever heard of trick or treat, and that was a bit scary too, because I think, as I seem to remember, something happened while they were out trick or treating which scared them very much. Can't quite remember what it was. I think maybe that was the first time they saw Boo Radley, and it may have scared them. I don't quite remember. But yes, it turned into a sort of a time where people needed to be frightened, which is a bit of a shame. But it's turned into a huge industry now. When I lived in America back in, I think it was 2000 and I suppose 2004, I remember staying with some relatives in Staten Island and walking around Staten Island, and nearly every house, I would say, had some sort of goblin or witch or something related, pumpkins, something related to Halloween. It was as big as Christmas. And I remember there was this Halloween parade in Manhattan, and we went to it, and it was just amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Just thousands of people dressed up in scary outfits, parading through central Manhattan. It's obviously a massive festival, and that has all now very much come to Europe. And here, even in Germany, which is usually quite conservative about these things and thinks, well, perhaps it's all a bit of a waste of time and we don't want to import all this American stuff. Even here in Germany, it happens. And as we speak, my daughter I've just picked her up from a Halloween party. and she went dressed as a black cat. So, yep, it's certainly even hit Germany. So, for tonight's episode, what I wanted to do was to use the 31st of October as we come towards midnight, and it's 23:36 now, as a chance for me just to see if I could pick up anything, any of the energy that I'm sure is around, because it is such a night that so many people around the world are celebrating, and the energy that's created by all of that, I imagine, has created almost a thought form personality, a consciousness of its own, like Christmas, as I learned. And I'll be very interested if I could just sit here peacefully, a bit like I did in Rendlesham Forest, and kind of see what comes along. I can't promise anything very much, but I will try to relax a little bit and meditate now. And when I come back, I'll start the recording, and let's see what happens. I've done my protection rituals. I've got a candle burning. I'm sitting in my sitting room. Who knows? I'll leave the microphone open, and if you hear anything, or if I hear anything, or if something comes through to me, let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm comfortably sitting here in my chair, and if it gets too boring, I can just edit out the quiet bits. So let's just leave it on and see what happens. Okay, so I feel in a good place now, and I would like to invite anyone from other dimensions, if you'd like to come through me and say anything, I'm here. I invite you to come through. I have a name that's coming through, and it's Harold. So, Harold, who are you? Harold is showing me something, and it looks to me like, on one hand, in my mind's eye, it looked like a hairbrush, but it's not. It's almost like a porcupine, or it's very thick black spikes in that are all connected to either a piece of wood or something. I'm getting the impression from Harold that he was somehow tortured using these spikes, maybe in some medieval period. All right, Harold, you're trying to show me that you were tortured? And if so, what relevance is that to Halloween? He's making funny songs. He's saying things like apes and monkeys. He's saying la 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 la. He's making a funny song with silly words. He seems to be trying to make light of the situation. He's certainly singing these songs. He's showing me horses and horse riding. He's giving me the impression of that perhaps he used to like riding horses in the open air in fields. He obviously had great pleasure. I have the sense of the wind in his hair as he was galloping in his horse. He seems to have been a very happy young man. And I suppose, yes, as he was riding his horse, he was singing his songs. But he's showing me, as he was riding over this hill, he got to the crest of the hill, and he looked down, and he could see in the distance hundreds and hundreds of other soldiers on their horses. And it would seem, the impression is that they are invading or about to attack. Yes, he's clearly a young man who's been sent out, a bit like an advance party to see what's happening. His army is behind him, and they're ready to defend and attack this oncoming army on the other side of this hill. And he's up there to spot, and he's just seen that, and he is completely shocked at what's happening down there. And he's turning around on his horse to ride back and report what he's just seen. I can hear the rumble of cannons, and it sounds like gunfire. It sounds like wind as well. There's obviously some real gathering battle that's about to take place, and is already taking place around him. I'm getting the impression now that as he was running away, he was suddenly surprised by other people on horseback, and he was struck hard in the back and the head with this long black spiked weapon. And I think the impression is that he was killed before he could ride back to the people and to warn them what was happening. It was the end of Harold. Is there anyone else who'd like to come through and tell me something? Please talk to me. Somebody is near and is telling me things. I'm hearing like quotations. Love is not the end. Love is just the beginning. Love is what you make of it. Love is up and down. I never had enough love. And this person who's coming through is saying he never meant to do it. He's saying that he killed someone, and he's so regretful that he did kill someone. He says he killed a child. But he didn't mean to do it. He did it for love. Oh, this man, he killed a child. And he killed the child. I think there was some relationship that he had, and he rather killed the child than share the child with the person that he had broken up with. But he's now saying he didn't mean to do it. And having done that, he killed himself. That's so sad. But he has such regret. He is so sorry for what he did. And he said he didn't mean to do it. It wasn't supposed to end like that. But the gun went off. And when he'd realized what he'd done, he knew that it was the end for him too. So he killed himself. He's saying that this type of activity is something that's going to cause him problems, even in the dimension that he's in, because he's interrupted not only his timeline, but also that of a child. And in this particular case, it's caused a big problem because the child wasn't prepared to die. Well, this is interesting because I've been feeling very strongly, probably for a week or two now, a strange feeling that Queen Elizabeth II, who came through to see me, or messaged through me back in, I think it's episode 11, some things have been happening which again are never strange coincidences with me. And I'll tell you what happened. I was in London last week, and I think it was last Tuesday night, I was walking with my children around Hyde Park, and it had just stopped raining, and I thought, well, let's walk back to where we were staying in Waterloo, which took us across Hyde Park Corner, and I could have gone down the road to Victoria, which would probably have been a quicker road eventually to walk across the Thames at Westminster Bridge. But I decided instead to take the kids down Constitutional Hill, and if you know London, that walks all the way along the side of Buckingham Palace Gardens. And while I was walking down Constitutional Hill, I relayed the story of Queen Elizabeth II, who had a visitor who broke in to, I think in the 80s, broke into Buckingham Palace. And in those days, the security obviously wasn't quite up to the standard that it is now. And this guy, I think his name was Donald Fagan, he managed to get into the Queen's private apartments even. And I believe even got into her bedroom. He wasn't an evil man. He wasn't a violent man. He was obviously slightly deluded, clearly. And he ended up confronting the Queen in her own bedroom, I believe, or bedroom apartments. And she was, by all accounts, cool as a cucumber, and even offered him tea, while I think she probably sidled up to her emergency button, which I think she pressed, and eventually the police came in and arrested this guy. But I think, as I remember, he spent probably the rest of his life, and maybe is still there in a mental institution. And she remembers it being okay. I mean, obviously it wasn't right, but she wasn't scared and she didn't feel threatened by this man. And I related that story. And of course, as you walk along now, you can see there are massively reinforced fences, and there's seems to be sort of electrical points and cameras, and so that probably tripwires and God knows what. There's no way that you can break into Buckingham Palace like that anymore. And we ended up eventually getting to the front, and as we came to the front, we could see all the activity by the gate on the right as you look at Buckingham Palace from the Mall. And we stood at the gate, and we saw all the motorbike riders, all the police motorbike riders coming. And as they came, the gates opened, and a black car came in with blacked out windows, and then the gates closed behind, and a number of the motorcyclists stayed out of the palace and parked up just in front there. And we were wondering who that was. So I went over to the police and said, "Who was that?" And they said, "Oh, that was the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, coming to meet the King. And if you hang around a bit longer, you'll see the King leave, King Charles." Well, of course, my kids were so thrilled at that. I mean, they would love to see the King. So we ended up waiting for like a half an hour, 45 minutes. And eventually the King came out. And as he did, he turned into his car, which was lit from the inside, especially so people could see him, a bit like a theatrical performance. And he waved at us, and we all waved back. And we all thought this was so nice. But, you know, it was interesting to me with everything that's been going on with Prince Andrew. And I reread from my book, chapter 11, to remind myself exactly what Queen Elizabeth II said to me back then. So that must be nearly 2 years ago. And she did say that the royal family was going to end, and it was a matter of the fullness of time, and it was meant to happen. And she was asking, I think, for a lot of charitable understanding for the young royals. She mentioned that something big was going to happen, but not necessarily to Prince Andrew, but it was going to be pretty earth-shattering. And of course, I think probably months later, it was announced that Charles had cancer, and then also Princess Kate had cancer. And you could really see, my God, I mean, nothing could have been bigger at the time. But it wasn't the thing that was going to probably start the real ending of the royal family. But of course, lately, with what's been going on with the Epstein files and Prince Andrew, I can really see now what's happening. And I have right now, this feeling that Queen Elizabeth II is going to come through again. And perhaps, talk to me briefly about what her feelings are at this particular moment, because things are reaching this fullness of time. And I'd be very interested. Maybe this is her trying to get my attention, because I've been thinking about her a lot. It was a strange coincidence that I suddenly saw her son, the King. And I've been feeling, yeah, I'd love her to make contact with me again. So let's see if we can't make contact with Queen Elizabeth II again. She most definitely is here, and she's again saying, please don't refer to me as Queen Elizabeth II. I'm not Queen Elizabeth II. I have memories of being this person, but I am just a community of consciousness. The consciousness that you might want to recognize as Queen Elizabeth II is still part of us, she's saying, and she's using that word us. Okay, I have a sense that you've been chasing me. You've been somehow getting my attention in London, and many of the things that you mentioned to me 2 years ago seem to have all happened. Is there anything you wanted to add? Is that why you've wanted to come through and talk? She's saying, I could talk about faces on stamps, she's saying. You know how when you're a king, quite often you have your image on a stamp. You have your image on money, she says. And it's not going to be very long for King Charles to have his image on a stamp or on a coin or on a banknote. She's saying that he hasn't got very long to live. She's saying that, again, I have to be careful about privacy, but she says that I don't think it's going to be a secret for very long. And I was indicating to you 2 years ago that this is the beginning of the end of the family, which is how it should be. This is the plan. And she's saying to me, when King Charles dies, which she's actually indicating is not going to be that far in the future. Apparently he is very sick, much sicker than we know. Sorry about that. I was just interrupted, but I'll be back again. Okay. She's indicating to me that King Charles is a very ill man, and he's much more ill than people will know, and he's the sort of person who is not going to allow that to slow him down or stop him. She says that he's waited so long for the chance to become king. He's going to try to enjoy it as much as he can, although the realization is to him now that it's going to be a very short period of time. She's saying that when he finally passes, that will be the end of the royal family. She believes that Prince William is not that interested in becoming the king, and also his wife, who's not been well at all either, wants to devote their family time as much as possible to the children and to their life, and they're doing their best to create a nice life for themselves. And the lessons that they have learned through tragedies that obviously happened to William are that there are things that are more important in life than just becoming a king. She's indicating to me that the same thing has happened in a way with Harry and Meghan, despite what everybody said at the time. Yes, she was trying to express how we need to have love and understanding and sympathy for them, and the choices that they're making. And she is saying that the choices that they're making are not that different from the choices that William will make, that it's not worth the strain that it'll place on his life and his family. But she's saying it's not going to pass beyond that. At that point, she's saying that this will become the end of the royal family as we know it. Although people will remain, there won't be people wanting to do the public duties anymore, and there'll be an increased feeling amongst the public that they don't wish to have this style of monarchy anymore. And it will be a consensus of the people, as well as a consensus of those people who are in the royal hierarchy and heredity. It'll become the natural, as she said before, and the natural conclusion to the whole system. And she just wanted to say to me that those are the impressions that she's wanting to share with me today, and what she's been wanting to say to me for a while. And for me to put it out there, she feels that that's the right thing to do. And again, she's just saying she really hopes that people will have love and compassion. Now she's mentioning to me again about that, this love and compassion and understanding. But could I say that there are not a lot of people at the moment who have love and compassion and understanding for the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he now is? What are we supposed to be making of all of that? Well, she's saying to me that not everything is what it seems. A lot of the stuff that we're being told is not true. Some of it most definitely is. And some of the things you are not being told about that have happened. She says, again, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but you could almost say that some of the things that Prince Andrew has been accused of are not as serious as some of the things that he has done that people do not know about. And she's indicating that this is the problem that the family understands, that we're at a point now that he cannot be defended because there's stuff that they know about. She's saying the stuff the whole family did know about. And stuff that they're also learning about. It's all going to be coming out in various channels, and people are going to be completely shocked, more shocked than they are at the moment, which is why the steps have been taken that they have this last 24 hours to try and get Andrew as far away as possible from the other members of the royal family. Wow, okay, I understand that. She's indicating to me also that this is going to play into people's minds and also be part of the decision-making process within William's mind, not to take up his position as king when King Charles finally dies. She's saying that all of this is having a terribly straining effect on King Charles. His weak health is already bad enough. But this worry that he is probably going to be the last monarch in British history is really weighing on his mind. And she again asks people to be sympathetic and full of love for this man, who only wants to do the very best because he's waited so long for it, and feels the tragic weight of history that he is probably going to be the last English king. I'm having these thoughts, of course, myself, as to why other members of the royal family or people way down the line of succession, and of course even Andrew, who's number 8, might want to take their rightful royal roles. But she's indicating to me that this is not going to happen. it's all going to change. The laws will change. There won't be a succession anymore. It'll be stopped. It'll be formally ended. So there'll be nothing to take. Wow. So this is all going to happen in the next year or two, I suppose. She's saying that she's not going to tell me the timeline, but it's going to happen very quickly. It's going to happen as sure as anything. And she's saying to me, focus on the future, because she says that Great Britain needs to develop as a country, and this will be the chance for it to break away from nearly 1,000 years of a particular form of history and move towards a more, she's saying democratic, but a more accepting future, where people feel that they wish to be in charge of their own destiny. And she's also mentioning that the concept of entitlement and divine right and having something purely from birth is a concept that is going to be upsetting not just people in Great Britain, but all over the world. And this will be part of the process of moving away from old established hierarchies. And these old established hierarchies, she says, will also affect the church. It's already, to a certain extent, she said, it affected the Church of England when the Archbishop of Canterbury resigned due to popular pressure. But she says all of that will stop, and it'll stop in the Catholic Church, it'll stop in many religions, when people will finally realize that they are as important and as relevant in the whole scheme of things as all these, if you like, artificial hierarchies that have been created over thousands of years. I'm having also this sense now that this also links somehow to the disclosure that's coming that we are not the only intelligent species that has been living on this earth, whether it's underneath the sea or above us or under the ground. And I think as the public become more aware of all of this, it's going to change everybody's attitude towards these hierarchical establishments. And it's going to also make them question who really is in charge. And is there anyone in charge? And do you need to have people in charge? And should we not all just be responsible for our own destinies and control through our own consciousness, our own forward momentum and our own destinies? That seems to be coming through very much as well. Okay, I thank you very much for coming through, especially for coming through on Halloween. I have to think more why you chose this particular day to come through. I suppose because so much is happening at the moment. Quite profound things. Well, it's midnight 20 on Saturday the 1st of November. I could never have expected that to have happened on Halloween. It was a very enjoyable experience. I am sad in a way. I do feel sad in a way because I grew up in England during the time of the royal family. But equally, I am hopeful that this is hopefully going to go ahead without bloodshed, and that everybody will be an awful lot happier at the end of it all. Okay, well, there we go. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.